The alarm function on my phone went off at 8 a.m., and that galvanized me into action. I jumped out of bed, ran downstairs to put the kettle on, then back up again to have a quick shower. I was expecting the shit to hit the fan just after 9, so I wanted to be ready. My wife Joanne was still sound asleep. We had not arrived home until 4 in the morning after dropping our youngest daughter, Michelle, off at university. Why Joanne should be so tired that she was sleeping in, I couldn't fathom, as I had just done all the driving on the 500-mile round trip whilst she slept most of the way. Joanne and I had been married for almost 25 years. We had 3 wonderful children, whom I am very proud of, as they had all made it to university. The oldest, Estelle, had graduated last year and was now, in theory, backpacking around the world. David was about to start his final year at Oxford, and finally, there was Michelle, whom we had just ferried up to Newcastle. Having had my shower, I rushed back down, made some coffee, and took it back to the bedroom. Here you go. Coffee, sleepyhead. God, what time is it? Almost 9. Time you shook a leg. Why, we've nothing on for today, she said as she pulled herself into a sitting position so she could drink her coffee. I, in the meantime, slapped 2 suitcases on the bed and began to put my clothes in them. Joanne watched me for a few moments before her curiosity got the better of her. What are you doing? What does it look like I'm doing, my love? Let me give you a hint. I'm taking my clothes out of my wardrobe and dresser and putting them into these suitcases. I would call that packing, wouldn't you? Why are you packing? Are you going somewhere? Well, I would have thought that was obvious. Where? Why? Why? You sit there and say, you don't know why. No, I don't know why. Joanne had gone very pale. She had taken me for a fool for many years and did not suspect that I had any idea of what she had been up to behind my back. Joanne, what do I do for a living? You run a security company and look after people's security for them, I suppose? I don't really know. You travel around meeting people a lot, but you never talk to me about your work, so I'm not sure. Wouldn't it be more honest of you to say you've never cared what I do? Providing you have had the money to spend, you have never showed the slightest interest in how I acquired it. For all you know, I could be a bank robber. Don't be silly. When we got married, you told me you worked for a big security firm. Then you started your own company. I know you work long hours, but you have never told me what you do. Yes, Joe and I do run a security company. When any of our friends or acquaintances asks, I tend to be a bit vague with them. But what I really run is a detective agency. I've 20 freelance detectives who work for me. They all specialize in different fields. Some work on company fraud and do background checks on prospective employees. Some work with security of computers, and some work on what we like to term domestics. Joanne had suddenly turned very pale, and I think I saw her stomach give a couple of lurches. Are you feeling all right, Joanne? If you're going to be sick, please make sure you do not make a mess on my clothes. Would you like me to get you a bowl? Don't be stupid. I'm not going to be sick. But I don't know what your job has got to do with your packing. Are you going on a trip that you haven't told me about? I went over to the dresser where my laptop was lying, lifted the screen, and hit the touchpad key. The screen flashed into life with a picture of Joanne on her knees naked. A man's tool was jammed down her throat. The man's moans of pleasure came out of the speakers. Well, I was bloody sick. The first time I saw a film of you behaving like that. Joanne was quick and went straight on the attack. What did you expect? You haven't made love to me in years. I had to find satisfaction somewhere. Just because you lost interest in having sex with me, did you think I should give up sex as well? Joanne, I stopped making love to you when I found out you were having threesomes with Tony and Greg, the 2 trainers at the health club. Because they were fucking any slut they could get their hands on, I didn't know what you might catch from them. On the subject of those 2, have you heard from Tony lately? Joanne didn't reply, she just sat there looking at the screen. You haven't answered me. Have you heard from Tony lately? No, I don't suppose you have. Well, for your information, he was admitted to an AIDS clinic last month. If I were you, I would go and have some tests done. Joanne was openly crying now. You bastard, you knew and said nothing. Nothing about what? Nothing about you fucking any guy that takes your fancy. Or nothing about Tony having AIDS. I honestly don't know how long he has been infected. As you haven't fucked him for about 3 years, you most likely are safe. But that doesn't mean you haven't picked up something from one of the other arseholes you've been screwing. Why didn't you say something? If you had said something when you found out about Tony and Greg, I would have stopped fooling around. What would have been the point? You have been fucking around on me ever since we were married. You surely didn't give a shit about me or my feelings. If I had challenged you, you most likely would have run off with one of your arsehole lovers and left me with the children. No, once I found out you were sleeping around, I decided to wait until the children had flown the nest and then leave you. You cold-hearted bastard. Do you mean to tell me that you have been planning to leave me the moment our children have left home? Not our children, Joanne. Your children. Only Estelle is mine. David and Michelle have two different fathers. Don't be so silly. Of course you're their father. I doubt you have any idea which of your lovers fathered them. But you know DNA is a wonderful science. It can tell who fathered which child. It took my people some time, but I know who their fathers are now and have taken steps to rectify things. This is ridiculous. You are the father to all three of our children. I put my hand up to silence Joanne. For fuck's sake, woman. You have been cheating on me since we first met, both before and since our marriage. For years, I worked myself to a frazzle to buy you whatever you wanted. You have taken the piss out of me for years, and in the end, I caught you. Stop trying to pretend that you are anything but a slut. Now from today, you are a single woman. You can fuck whoever you like with a clear conscience. At that moment, the phone began to ring. That will be for you, Joanne. I'm surprised they haven't rang earlier. Joanne glowered at me as she picked up the phone. Then I listened to one side of what I thought was an entertaining conversation. Hello. Yes, it's me. He's doing what? How much for? 300,000 pounds. You've got to be bloody kidding. He can't do that. Can he? I'm sorry, Dave. I didn't know he knew. He has just told me he is leaving me. How the hell do I know? He said something about DNA. You tell me how I can stop him. I told you he's leaving me. Well, you appear to enjoy yourself enough at the time. Fuck you, too. You arsehole. With that, Joanne slammed the phone down and started crying again. That was David Tucker. He says you're suing him for 300,000 pounds. She mumbled through her tears. That's right. I have fed and clothed his son for 21 years. Paid for a private education and supported him through Oxford. I think he's getting off quite lightly. Don't you? But now I think I want my money back from his real father, and if I'm lucky it will fuck up his marriage. You are going to destroy his marriage. Haven't you got a conscience? Come off it, Joanne. Where do you get off talking about my conscience? Where was your conscience when you fucked him? And where was Tucker's conscience when he was fucking my wife? He chose to fuck you, and that left you pregnant. Now he can pay for the privilege of fucking you. The pair of you chose to let me believe that David was mine. I thought he was yours, honestly. You were probably fucking so many guys you didn't know or care who was David's father. But I know, and so does David now. You told him? How could you do that? You callous sod. Of course, I told him. He has the right to know who his father is. To tell you the truth, he suspected what kind of woman his mother was. Why do you think he has spent so little time at home since he started university and did not come near here this summer? You've driven him away from me. I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but it was he who didn't want to come here and see you. I tried to make him at least say goodbye, but I should imagine you will see him at the divorce court. My cell phone played its little tune to say I had a text message. I read the message, then turned back to Joanne. Ah, perfect timing. David has just informed me that Michelle no longer wishes to know or be in contact with you. Her father will also have got my summons by now. You bastard, you've turned them all against me. Hold on, that message can't be from David. He's in New York. You wish. Neither David nor Estelle left the country this summer. They have both been staying at my new house. Well, it's Estelle's house actually. We didn't want your lawyers to be able to try to make any claim on it. The children don't wish to see you anymore. David and Estelle were in a car parked behind us when we left Michelle's lodgings last night. They have explained to her what you have been doing and why I am leaving you. Michelle was given the choice of which parent she wanted to go with. It appears she has opted to go along with her siblings. Joanne, it looks like you are alone. You can't do that. They're my children. All three of your children have had a completely free choice. They know who has looked after them all their lives. And they know who has spent her time living it up and behaving as a whore. I'll stop you. You can't take my children away. Your children have had a free choice, Joanne. I know I can trust them to make the right decisions. Oh, when you contact your solicitor, tell him that my company actually belongs to Estelle and has for the last few years. No sense in them wasting time and money trying to claim a share in something I don't own. Bastard. Joanne shouted at me as I left the room with my suitcases. They were the last words I ever heard her say. Joanne didn't contest the divorce and I pay her no maintenance. David and Michelle's fathers settled out of court. Not for the 300,000 pound I asked for, but enough to give both of them a good start in life. What happened to the arseholes' marriages is no concern of mine. The children refused to see Joanne and officially we don't know where she is. One of the staff reported to me that she was charged with prostitution a few months back, but I have managed to keep that from the children. I'm marrying my ex-secretary Samantha in a few weeks. No, we didn't have anything going between us whilst I was married. When I first found out about what Joanne had been up to, it was Sam in whom I confided. She left the firm to have a baby several years ago. Whilst she was still in hospital after having the child, she found out her husband was shacking up with some tart. Naturally, she turned to me for support. Sam is 10 years younger than I am, but my children encouraged us to go for it. Life goes on.
Dear listener, if you have reached this far, please click on the subscribe button. It will be a great help.
I, a 32-year-old male, and my wife, 31, have enjoyed a great relationship in our 2 years of marriage. Despite our busy 9-to-5 jobs, office work, meetings, and occasional business trips, we maintained a strong connection. Even when our schedules kept us apart for days, we understood and respected each other's career trajectories. Having a driver was a convenience, especially for my wife, who wasn't fond of driving. The driver was primarily for her use since she had various places to go. We both had our cars, and the driver had been with us since we got married, proving to be competent at his job. However, a few weeks ago, our driver passed away, and we had to find a replacement. After contacting various companies and agencies, we hired a new driver, a young and competent 27-year-old. Despite his good background, I couldn't help but feel skeptical and perhaps a bit jealous and insecure. The new driver's youth and good looks triggered some wariness in me, knowing he would be spending a lot of time around my wife. It wasn't about distrusting her. I trusted her completely. It was more about my uncertainties regarding him. I couldn't shake the feeling that he might try something funny. My wife, being an attractive woman, added to my concerns. After a few weeks of him working with us, I finally brought up the topic with my wife. She reassured me, expressing how great he was at his job and even comparing him favorably to our late driver. Despite my lingering worries, I decided not to voice them out, as she seemed genuinely pleased with his service, and I chose to let my concerns slide for the time being. With time, I got used to the new driver's presence, and it seemed like my initial worries were unfounded. He hadn't caused any trouble, and it was clear that he was doing his job well. About a month into his service, everything was going smoothly. However, some weeks back, I started to notice subtle changes in my wife's behavior. While not alarming, it did seem a bit odd. Her outings, which were usually due to her busy job, seemed to be lasting longer. When I inquired, she explained that her schedule was more packed, and there was nothing to worry about. I chose to believe her and didn't dwell on it too much. Additionally, she appeared to be getting along really well with the driver. She would come home and share stories about how thoughtful he was, staying late because of her and waiting patiently for her to finish work or meetings without complaining. She even mentioned a time when she felt sick and called him to take her to the hospital when I was out of town. Apparently, he rushed over on his day off to help her. She suggested giving him a raise, and I agreed, trusting her judgment. A few days ago, I had to travel again for a business trip. Initially planned for a week, the trip concluded earlier than expected, allowing me to return 2 days earlier. Feeling bad for not spending quality time together due to my frequent travels, I decided to surprise her and planned a lovely night. I even planned to take her out the next day for some quality alone time since it was a weekend. Excitement built up as I reached home, exhausted after a late flight. Upon arrival, however, I noticed that her car wasn't there. This was unusual because she was never home that late, and the driver typically clocked out by 10 p.m. at the latest. I couldn't understand where she could be, especially since she usually informed me if something was keeping her out that late. I met her security guard and inquired about them, wondering if there was an issue with her car that required a visit to the mechanics. The security assured me that nothing was wrong with her car. He informed me that she had gone out earlier and still hadn't returned. I instructed him not to mention my return when she came back and to pretend that everything was normal. He agreed, and I entered the house, quickly dropping off my belongings in my room, removing my shoes, and turning off the lights as they were when I first arrived. I then sat in the living room, waiting for her. About 30 minutes later, I heard her car driving into the compound. I silently waited by the window, observing as she exited the passenger seat, looking all dressed up as if she had attended a special event. The driver also emerged, locked the car door, but instead of leaving, he walked her to the door. I hid by the entryway, waiting as she unlocked the door and dragged him inside. I could see them giggling and kissing. The anger in me reached a boiling point, and I couldn't contain it. I immediately emerged from my hiding place, flipping on the lights, startling them. They looked like deer caught in headlights. My wife began to stutter, asking why I was home and stating that she didn't expect me back yet. She tried to act innocent, but it was too late. I had already seen everything. I didn't need to hear any lies or excuses. Standing at the doorway, I kicked them both out of my house. I promptly fired the driver, instructing him to leave before I called the police. As for my wife, I told her to get off and not bother returning. I assured her not to worry about her belongings, as I would pack them and send them via courier. I also informed her to expect divorce papers and to sign them as soon as she received them. I shut the door in both their faces and went back into the house, unable to fathom that my 2-year-old marriage had come to such an end. My soon-to-be ex-wife has since left me nearly 200 missed calls and messages. Now for the second story. We've been married for 8 years, together for over 10, and have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old son. My wife also has 3 children from a previous marriage. When we first moved in together in 2013, she quit her job and got an admin job at the company I was working for. During that time, she struck up a friendship with a guy from that company, and they would carpool to and from work. Sometimes he would hang out at our house, and I didn't think much of it, considering it a healthy coworker relationship. I had known this guy before meeting my wife, and he was married. We had even socialized together at Christmas parties, and everything seemed fine. However, my wife only lasted at that job for about a year, and we lost touch with the guy, except for occasional interactions on social media. Fast forward a few years, I quit my job in late 2017 to start my own real estate practice. Since then, our financial situation took a hit, and our lifestyle changed. I used our savings to sustain my business in its early stages, took out jobs and side gigs, and struggled to maintain our previous standard of living. This period of change, coupled with having our second child in 2015 and her oldest moving out in 2018, caused strain in our relationship. By 2020, our relationship faced challenges. I was mentally struggling, and my wife expressed dissatisfaction with our lack of connection. She mentioned craving attention, and our intimate life suffered, with months passing without any physical intimacy. Our routines became monotonous, with her spending all day watching Netflix and me scrolling through my phone when at home. In an attempt to find some solace, I decided to take a trip to see my mom after 3 previously canceled plans. I just returned from a trip to see my mom, and things took an unexpected turn. I suggested my wife come along, but she said she had to quarantine before going back to work. While away, I noticed a weird vibe from her, treating me more like a friend through phone calls and IMs. When I got back, she dropped a bombshell. She felt we were in the process of breaking up. The reasons she cited included the lack of intimacy, my apparent unhappiness, and other issues. I opened up about being in a dark place emotionally, especially regarding our relationship and work expectations. Despite the challenges, I expressed a desire to salvage our marriage, believing we still had a 50-50 chance. We started discussing the future, and I began counseling for my depression. As I pulled myself together, focusing on work, exercise, and healthy eating, my business unexpectedly took off. Despite ongoing uncertainties, we were still sleeping together and trying to figure things out. Then, out of the blue, I received a text from the guy's wife, containing screenshots of my wife and him. They had been meeting up for lunches, exchanging affectionate messages, and expressing their feelings for each other, all happening while I was away, just before our breakup conversation. I've just uncovered even more disturbing details, including a text from 2013, the day I proposed to my wife. In that message, she tells the other guy about our engagement and shares a deeply inappropriate dream involving him. Confronting her, she admits to meeting up with him, involving serious making out. When pressed about pictures in what seems like a house, she can't explain where it is, adding to the deception. After taking a day to process everything, I told her that we're just co-parenting now. I don't want to be with her, and once we figure out the logistics for the kids, I'm out. Her response, claiming this was my easy way out, adds insult to injury. To make matters worse, the guy involved seems to be far from an upstanding person, with a troubled history including jail time and probation. In a fit of rage, I confronted the guy and physically confronted him at his office the next day. He fled, but the encounter made it clear that they both thought they could escape consequences for their actions. After calming down, my wife downplays the situation, considering it a minor mistake. However, I can't shake the feeling that her actions speak louder than words. This isn't the first time she's ended a marriage with infidelity, and to me, It feels like she gave up on us long before confessing. Despite my significant personal growth, making good money, having a successful real estate practice, losing weight, and adopting healthier habits, I'm struggling to see a way past this ultimate betrayal. In my mind, the relationship is irreparably damaged, and I can't envision a path back to love and trust. The level of disrespect and betrayal is too profound for me to consider reconciliation.
Dear listener, if you have reached this far, please click on the subscribe button. It will be a great help.